Howdy and welcome to the Junction Cast. We are back. I'm David Francis, and with me as always is Rob White.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
It's been a little while, Rob.
Yeah, it has. I mean, what? October 31st? Is that right?
31st. Halloween. Our special spooky episode was our 10th episode, and I almost, before we started recording, I almost said, hey, let's make this season 2, but none of that nonsense. Just jumping straight back into it with a bunch of sports talk that we have curated and stuff that's been happening over the last several months, stuff that's been happening over the last couple weeks. We're going to talk about a bunch of it, but we wanted to give you a little bit of update in our lives, seeing as we haven't talked for several months since November. So, Rob, what's been going on?
Oh, man. Let me pull up my laundry list here. As far as things that have been going on in my life, obviously had baseball season, and that had its ups and downs in a lot of ways. Got into a relationship, immediately got out of a relationship. Not going to name any names on why that happened, but on the flip side, I'm doing pretty good, kind of getting away from that. I heard there's some other big stuff going on in your life, but we'll get back to that in a minute. I know for me, the other big thing that's been going on, I got a dog over Christmas. Her name is Bubbles, and she is an old English bulldog. She is a wonderful little pup. And I would say probably the biggest thing going on right now is I've been playing in the band. They're called Jordan, Nix, and the Day Drinkers. And we have been playing all over Texas and actually getting ready to release an album coming up in September. We just got out of the studio up in Fort Worth. So,
man, that is awesome. So September, we can look forward to the album.
Yeah, and I'll be talking about that, obviously promoting it a little bit because there's a lot of good stuff coming on that. It's kind of it's what we like to call rustic rock, and actually I think that's what we're going to call the first album. It's southern rock and red dirt and all kinds of stuff just kind of mixed together. It's a very unique sound.
Cool. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, so pretty excited about that. So what's going on with you, man?
Man, I have just had a crazy couple of months. I'll tell you what, obviously the biggest thing in my life clearly was graduating. Okay, that's not quite true. Not quite true.
Absolutely not.
In February, I got engaged, so
Yeah.
I will be getting married in January. To my now fiance. We've been dating for almost 4 years, and we've known each other forever, so that's really exciting. On May 11th, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in sport management from Texas A&M. Whoop! So that's been really exciting, and just looking for a job now, and hopefully college athletics. So, that job search is interesting. But that's a topic for another time, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. I was sport management, too, so I feel you. I understand how that works.
Well, Rob, interestingly enough, our lives were not the only thing happening since November.
Oh, not at all.
There have been some sports, in case you were curious. I didn't know if you had followed, but there have been a couple of sports that have happened.
Oh, sure.
Case in point, the day after we released our last episode, the Houston Astros won their first World Series.
Go Stros! They took care of business, man. They
absolutely did, in a great Game 7. After a great series, Game 5 is arguably the best baseball game ever played.
Oh, absolutely.
And so Game 7, they close it out in L.A., beat the Dodgers, win the first World Series in 7 games. A great World Series. Definitely not a boring World Series. I mean, lots of runs, great pitching. Baseball fans, non-baseball fans, there's a lot to be had in this World Series.
Yeah, there was a lot of entertainment value with it. I mean, it was really cool. You had a lot of great storylines on both sides of on both dugouts. But especially looking at this Astros team now, looking back at all the players and, especially a lot of their life experiences that all culminated in this championship-winning team. I mean, you got to talk about how impressive that was to see. I mean, between Jose Altuve and Evan Gattis and Justin Verlander making his comeback, I mean, it was an absolutely wonderful. I mean, it's an ESPN 30 for 30 waiting to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it was a really cool story to follow. And, all the credit to the Dodgers, they went in and really did what they needed to do to get a team that was good enough to compete in the World Series. And by all means, the Astros did not just cakewalk in there.
Oh, no, absolutely not. They had a rough time. And, I mean, you look at it, even in Game 7, I mean, the Astros put up runs, but it was against pretty much the best pitcher in the league that year. I mean, Clinton Kershaw was unstoppable last year, and they put it on him in Game 7 and got it done.
Yeah, so it was fun to watch. Unfortunately for you, Darvish, he had a little bit of struggle point as well, but that's the way the baseball goes.
It is. It's a weird sport that way.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about the Astros and their continue of dominance into 2018 in a little bit. But to continue the recap, we've got Aggie football. We missed the most exciting month of Aggie football on the podcast, Rob, November. We didn't even talk about it.
We actually won a game in November.
Yes, we did.
I know.
One or two.
Man, what a weird concept. Actually, I think we won two, but we won an SEC game in November.
Which was surprising.
Unprecedented.
It was an interesting finish to the season. The Ags ended up getting to 7-5 at the end of the season. They went to the Belk Bowl, lost to Wake Forest in a barnstormer of a game.
Defense optional. There was nothing going on.
Oh, man. The offense was just going during that game. That was absolutely an incredible football game to watch. Of course, unless you cared about defense, in which case maybe not so incredible. To recap the November, we started off at home against Auburn. We looked pretty darn competitive in that game until the end. Ended up falling 42-27. We took on New Mexico at home, 55-14, big win.
I like that one.
Kind of what we expected. And then we went on the road for 2 games, went to Ole Miss, won 31-24 in a game that I don't think either team had any business winning.
No, it was. I was there, actually. It was a cold night. It was a lot of fun to watch, especially with the amount of Ole Miss fans that were in the stands, which was very, very few. It was a very light crowd.
I just remember that was the game that they kept panning over and showing, I guess it was the quarterback. They kept showing his family, like his mom and his dad. And it was hilarious because we'd be watching the game and then every 5 minutes they'd be showing that kid's mom and dad. I'm like, okay, that's that kid's mom and dad. We don't necessarily need to look at them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Then we closed out the season, as is tradition, with a loss to LSU, 45-21, nowhere close. Once again, Kevin Sumlin failed to beat LSU, something he did not accomplish while the head coach at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And after 6 seasons, that was it for Kevin Sumlin.
Yep. I mean, it was a fun ride with him, to be sure. It was good to see a lot of good high-octane offenses, especially those first couple of years. But more and more, the further we got away from the Manziel era and the Sherman recruited teams, the more you started to see the flaws in his system. And even looking at the flaws of his recruiting classes now. Not to say that these are bad kids, but it just wasn't a very well-gelled team. I mean, all you have to do is look at the 2013 recruiting class and how sparse it was by the time we got through to the end of their career at A&M.
And I think that that's probably a good way to put it. I'm not – I mean, don't get me wrong. We talked a lot about how we were displeased as fans and as supporters of this team. And we talked through great length about that in early episodes of this show. But I think the fact of the matter is it's not that Kevin Sumlin is necessarily a horrible coach. It's that it just didn't gel. There was no unity. Like after 12 and 13, once you got past that era of those teams and the big names left, it was hard to put a cohesive unit on the field, offense and defensive wise, that was gonna get you big wins.
Yeah, all you had to really do was look at the 15 and the 14 teams and just kind of see what happened with a lot of those recruits that we brought in. I mean, you look at the fact that you have 2 5-star quarterbacks on the staff and they're both gone by the end of the year. I mean, that's very clearly and now looking back at what a lot of those players had to say was very much a locker room issue and a lot of disparity between the coaching staff and the players. So unfortunately, that's the kind of stuff that happens in the game of football, but it sucks when it happens to your team.
Absolutely, and we'll get more deep into how we feel about Kevin Sumlin and obviously the whole process that went on there. Kind of recapping his tenure at A&M in a couple of weeks when we start looking at football season more seriously. But the last bit of football news to talk about, obviously, we hired Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah, unprecedented hire in my opinion. I mean, you got to think about the amount of money that A&M threw at this guy.
A ton.
And absolutely ridiculous. He's the second highest paid coach in football right now. You got to think that this guy got a stupid amount of money. And honestly, I think it's, a lot of people say, oh, you're just, you're paying for the name, you're not paying for the product. I'm like, I see it as you're paying for an investment at this point.
Absolutely.
You're investing.
It is an investment type opportunity where you hedge your bets and you say, look, this guy's had success. We know he's had success. We know he's done it. And yeah, it was in a different system, in a different place, against different teams. I think we can all, agree that the ACC and the SEC are different. Now, I think you could make the argument that there were a couple years in those ACC when Jimbo Fisher was there that they may have been better than the SEC. That's an argument for another time. But yeah, A&M hires Jimbo Fisher away in what I think I probably have to agree with most people and say it was the second biggest hire of the offseason. I would give biggest hire, obviously, to UCLA with Chip Kelly. Huge get for them. Again, more college football talk to come in the later weeks as we get closer to the season.
Absolutely.
Later on in the year, we got to the basketball season, which was something I was super excited about that we had talked about a couple of times on the show. And, boy, the first month or so, that was exciting.
Yeah, no, you got to look at some of those players out there. And, a lot of the key guys, you look at Robert Williams III. This dude was running around the court like he was a man on a mission. And just seeing a lot of the team gelling. You saw big wins against West Virginia and Oklahoma State, a lot of these traditional Big 12 powers. Heck, we took advantage of a lot of big opportunities in non-conference, which was good to see. Really the only stumble being against Arizona.
Absolutely. The downside was that after we played Arizona, we had a couple of good games going through December, and then we fell flat on our face.
Little bit.
Conference play was atrocious. At best, it was not great. We started off against Alabama. I remember watching that game, sitting and watching the game. I was so excited. Alabama had two great young guys that were, doing just so well. Our team was clicking on all cylinders. This looked like, Alabama had kind of come out of nowhere as like a dark horse SEC contender. And this game kind of looked like it was going to be a really good game between two really good basketball teams. One people really expected in A&M and one people really didn't expect in Alabama. And it was not that at all.
No, it really wasn't. Just they came out flat. The boys just didn't look good from the get-go and really just didn't really have much of a motivation to play. And you saw that over the next several games, too.
Yeah, it was bad. They started out there, and then it was just game after game of struggles. They ended up finishing the season not doing very well. And then we got to go meet Alabama in the SEC tournament. And this kind of looked like it could be a turning point. It looked like maybe we could win this game, get a little deeper into the SEC tournament, have a little luck, and, maybe get a lot further than people were looking at us to do in the SEC tournament.
Yeah. And honestly, you look at the way the team played for most of the game, and it really did look that way for a lot of reasons. But then right there at the end, the guys just kind of sat back and let them just come right back down the court and score the game-winning basket.
That was frustrating. I remember sitting there watching that game, and I remember that I don't necessarily remember who made it, but somebody from the Aggies, they made a shot, 3 seconds left or whatever, and it was exciting. It was just everybody was pumped up, ready to go. We had found our stride a little bit after a couple of games. Here we go. This was kind of right after the heels of that Kentucky game at home. We had done very well in that game. We come into the SEC tournament not expecting to do that great. Here we go. We're going to upset Alabama. And lo and behold, they inball the ball to Con Sexton. He runs up the court, lays it in, game over.
Yeah. And, that just spoke to, honestly, I think what really summed up our season in a lot of ways, even with, the decent run in the tournament, which came later. But, it just was very much a summation of how little effort our guys put in a lot of the time. And, coaching as well, just it was rough. And there was a lot of people calling for Billy Kennedy said at the end of that regular season, too.
Absolutely. And it was interesting. Despite a lot of thoughts of a lot of people, the Aggies did make the tournament, and they had a rough first game. And then after that rough first game, they went to go play against North Carolina in the round of 32. And I thought that was it. Honestly, I didn't even pick A&M to win their first game. I couldn't even tell you who their opponent was, to be honest.
Providence.
Providence, that's what it was.
Yeah, it was those Friars.
That's right. And
yeah.
I honestly didn't even think we would win. Obviously we're the higher seed. I kind of thought, hey, they're going to get a little bit of juice. We were kind of playing flat, especially after our last game being that Alabama game. I just kind of expected us to bow out after a round 1 loss, and that didn't happen. Win in round 1, and then we go take on number one seed, North Carolina. No,
I think they were 2
seed, North Carolina, and boy, oh boy, you want to talk about one of the most important games in Aggie basketball history.
And beat them there too.
Absolutely,
in North Carolina,
destroyed them. It was not close. And it really felt like it was going to get close, and it just kind of never did. It was a bad story all night for North Carolina. DJ Hogue could not miss. We had a lot of support from the young guys. TJ Starks was given a lot of good shots and support, and the Aggies rolled. And after that game, I kind of got some hope in me, to be honest.
I did have some hope, but then also, just the one thing that was just kind of pressing in my mind was I was like, this is what we came to expect of this basketball season. Come out, beat the pants off of somebody we weren't supposed to, and then turn around and kind of struggle around again. And, unfortunately, that's exactly what we saw that next game against Michigan.
Exactly what we saw. Went to play Michigan in the Sweet 16, and once again, it was not close, but it was the other side. And Michigan dominated A&M throughout the game. Granted, Michigan went to the national title game. We'll give them that. They played for a national title. So, obviously, a pretty good basketball team. And the Aggies very, very struggled in that game against Michigan. And honestly, that's where that thought that you just kind of mentioned hit me. This team was expected to do what they did. Yeah. There was no doubt in my mind preseason that we could come out and beat North Carolina in the tournament.
Yeah.
And after the season, I did have that doubt. When we went into that game with North Carolina, I said, okay, well, this is over. If we can keep it close, cool, but I don't think that's going to happen. And we came out and just beat the pants off of them.
Yeah, no, this was a team that was just a team of a roller coaster. You had the talent that could be on the court and that could beat the best teams in the country day after day. We were absolutely a very prominent dark horse for the tournament, but at the same time, that same talent just wouldn't gel, or somebody would have a bad day, and that would lead to everybody else having a bad day, and you would lose to Vanderbilt, or you would lose to whoever. And that is, unfortunately, the story of this basketball season. A lot of good potential that was ultimately, yes, it led to a good Sweet 16 run, but very easily could have been a lot deeper into the tournament than that.
Exactly. I kind of completely agree. I think that there was just not cohesiveness. It didn't exactly gel quite right. And so, yeah, the Aggies end up losing to Michigan after beating a great North Carolina team, which, again, I think we all thought was possible preseason. I think everybody would have agreed that if we faced North Carolina in the round of 32, which I think that a lot of people thought would be seeded a lot higher and wouldn't have to worry about that. But I think that a lot of people would have said, if we face North Carolina in the round of 32, heck yeah, we got a shot. I don't know if anybody would have guaranteed we win by 20 points or whatever, but
Yeah,
we all would have said, hey, yeah, we've got a shot. And, hey, we're going to the Sweet 16. Preseason, I would have said, yeah, we got a shot. I mean, preseason, this team, you know, as far as on paper, obviously we hadn't seen them, and, you know, with Dwayne Wilson being there, we hadn't seen him play yet, but on paper, this team looked like they could go to the Elite Eight or maybe in the Final Four.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of good talent there. And, I mean, really just all around, it was a good-looking team. And, you know, I think it'll be a season of what-ifs that I think a lot of people will question. Was this a coaching issue? Was this a player issue? You know, people have their theories one way or the other, but I definitely think that there was a lot more to this team that could have been exploited, and it just wasn't at the key point.
Absolutely. So the only really question I have for you on this is, are you upset? You know, there's a lot of people that are just really kind of happy, like, hey, like, we stumbled, and stumbled is like the best adjective I can give. Stumbled through the SEC, you know, and now, you know, you end up with a Sweet 16 berth after you demolish a North Carolina team. Like, can you be upset? Can you say, well, I really expected more? Or do you have to sit back and say, look, from what they gave me, I've got to be happy with this. This was a great tournament run for what this team gave us.
I think, and it's the same thing I've said for baseball for many years. Like, it doesn't matter how you do in the regular season as long as you can make the tournament. Once you make the tournament, all bets are off. Yeah, and I mean, you saw that with this team. But on the same token, as much as it was, you know, getting to the tournament and having that good game, and really, truly, some of these wins we had this season, you know, beating the pants off of West Virginia, beating the pants off of Oklahoma State, taking North Carolina to the cleaners, you know, those are big wins for this program. Hell,
absolutely.
Even Kentucky, who was having a little bit of a down year, we beat the pants off of them.
That was a huge game.
Yeah, you know, and this team had that. But at the same time, now you flip the script and you look at the recruiting class, you know, now that Billy Kennedy has. And it just for a long time, he only had like one signed recruit. I mean, there was a lot of, okay, this was it. And now we don't know what's going to happen with the rest of this program. And I think that's what's going to be irritating for so many people is this was the team.
Absolutely.
This was the team. This was the talent.
Yep.
And unfortunately, now it's looking like that we may not get back to that for a while. That hurts.
I absolutely agree with you. That's the most frustrating thing to me is that this was, again, you said it, the team. This was a great basketball team, especially on paper. You know, you have Robert Williams, Tyler Davis. Admon Gilder looked like he was going to have his breakout year, which, I mean, he didn't need one. He's always been great. He's been very underrated since he's been at A&M. But this looked like where he could just open up. DJ Hogue looked like he was going to be the best three-point shooter maybe in the SEC. I mean, he looked phenomenal. And none of that happened. We even got the surprise graduate transfer that turned out really well. You know, that's been Billy Kennedy's MO for several years is, hey, we'll bring on a graduate transfer. They'll play point guard, and we'll see what happens. And the past couple of times, it has not worked out well. Dwayne Wilson comes in, and he rocks it. He did absolutely phenomenal. And, again, through no fault of his own, ended up injured, had that problem, was unable to finish out the season. And, you know, obviously, best of luck to all these guys. Robert Williams got drafted in the NBA draft to the Celtics. Tyler Kennedy, I don't know why I just said that name. Tyler Davis, and DJ Hogue, Admon Gilder, these guys off playing summer league ball. Best of luck to all of them. Obviously hope they succeed in everything they do, basketball and otherwise. But this season was just not what we thought it was going to be.
No. And, I mean, like I said, lots of squandered potential in a lot of ways. So, I mean, now we can just sit back and see what happens from here. You know, you got to have some hope that we're going to get it all together and just have, like, an outstanding season next year. But it's going to be hard to say that with the lack of talent that will be on this team for the next season.
Got to have hope. Well, we would be absolutely, unbelievably unable to talk about basketball if we weren't going to mention the Aggie women. They had a phenomenal year. They had a great year. They ended up
Absolutely.
getting knocked out of the tournament again. However, they did have one incredible moment of their own by freshman Kennedy Carter, who is one of the best players in NCAA women's basketball. She is absolutely phenomenal. Just a couple of accolades she was awarded. She was unanimous National Freshman of the Year. She was an AP and WBCA All-American. She was the SEC Freshman of the Year, first team All-SEC, All-SEC tournament, 4-time SEC Freshman of the Week. Okay? She set the A&M record for the most points in a game at USC with 46. She also set the 4th and 5th best scoring efforts in A&M history. Yeah. And she holds the 4th highest points per game in tournament history at 31.3 points per game.
Yeah.
She was on fire. She was absolutely phenomenal throughout the season, throughout the postseason. And so I will be keeping my eye on Kennedy Carter. She was absolutely electric and will continue to be during her time at A&M.
Oh, yeah. Gary Blair always has a good squad. And, while they're not necessarily as good as the 2011 squad, I mean, you can see that, the players always rally around him, and he's got a great program here. And, I think with Carter going forward, I think that's going to be a very exciting thing to watch, especially with the amount of talent that she does have. And, I mean, you saw it, when she came back and ended up helping A&M win, coming back from that huge deficit in the tournament. That was a great opportunity to see A&M and what's going to be coming from the basketball program. So I haven't been following a lot of it, but I'll definitely be keeping my eye open this next fall.
Absolutely. Well, after the basketball season's ended, we started Rob's sport. We got some baseball back in Aggie land. So I'm going to let Rob give us a rundown of the Aggie baseball season from beginning to finish.
All right, well, let's check this out. So, baseball, this was another season of rebuilding in a lot of ways. You had a lot of guys that, we came from a team that was a College World Series team, but we had to very much stumble to get there. Squeaked into the tournament last season by the skin of our teeth and made our way all the way up to the College World Series in Omaha, and that was really cool to see. Didn't do much when we got there, but lots of optimism coming into the season. The boys did a really good job in the early series, sweeping Rhode Island, taking care of their non-conference Tuesday nights, took care of Cornell, and as well as went up to the Frisco College Baseball Classic for the first time in its very first year.
I heard that was a lot of fun. How was it?
So it was. I was not there personally, but from what a lot of people told me, it was an absolute blast. I mean, you want to talk about, they wanted to create a regional atmosphere at this ballpark. So they had walk-up songs for every player. They had little aspects of, the visiting, for each team in that ballpark. I mean, they have the little ribbon board that runs around the outside of the stadium. And on that ribbon board, they had a little train that would run along for A&M, stuff like that. They allowed people to bring bubbles. They told Mississippi State they could bring cowbells next year. I mean, they want to create a family-friendly, college-friendly environment at this classic, which is something that a lot of other tournaments can't.
They definitely want this to be something that you want to travel to. It's an opportunity for you to see your squad play 3 different teams, right? Because you play all 3 teams, right?
They played Louisiana Tech, they played Baylor, and Cal.
Right. This is an opportunity for you to go travel with your squad, see them play 3 pretty good baseball teams. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna stack this little tournament with 1, 2, 3, 4 in the nation. Like, that's not gonna happen.
No.
But you go see them play some different competition you normally wouldn't see, and it's in a fun place. I mean, this is a cool ballpark. They're again allowing you to make it feel like home. Which allows you to, have a very interesting home away from home environment.
Yeah. And, I mean, props to the social media team because, they approached us because I also run the 203 Twitter account, and they approached us immediately, and we're just like, hey, are you guys coming up? Are you guys really excited about being here? And we said, yeah, y'all going to let us bring bubbles? They said, yeah, even, and we'll also, stack together a section for you guys. So, I mean, there was a group, about 20 or 30 people that were able to make the trip, and they all ended up getting to sit together which was cool. And they had their little blocked off seats, so it was cool to see that happen. And I'm definitely looking forward to when we go back here in 2 years to go check it out.
Awesome.
So continuing on the recap, took care of Northwestern State 2-game mid-series. One was an 11 inning game that we ended up having to win in walk-off fashion. Then we went and swept Long Beach State, which was a really nice little home stand where we took care of business. We allowed only 3 runs on the weekend, but then we ended up getting into our stretch once again, conference play, where A&M struggled a little bit, namely in series wins. While we were taking outside of one series where we were swept against Arkansas on the road, we were able to take games from every other series, but we ended up losing 7 of our SEC series, which is not a good thing looking ahead. So, lost the series against Auburn, went on the road, beat Rice, and then we lost a very tight home series against Ole Miss. Every game was decided by 1 run. It was a very tight series, a very energetic series. Went on the road and lost to Georgia, which was a surprise team out of the SEC this year. A lot of people didn't think they were going to do very well, and they ended up doing pretty decent, earning themselves a regional spot by the end of the year. Hosted LSU, who was also in a little bit of a down year, but we took care of business against them. And then that big Tuesday night game against Texas in College Station, where the Aggies took care of business 6-5 and set.
That was a fun one.
Yeah, and set a Bluebell Park record for attendance. I think it was like 7,900 or something ridiculous that.
It was packed. I mean, obviously, both of us were there very early, in line, waiting for the gates to open to go get a seat in general admission, and so it was busy. It was a packed night, but a fun night, a lot of fun.
Oh, great crowd. I mean, you want to talk about, I think a lot of people started coming back to games after going to that game, and that's one of the reasons why I'm all for playing Texas every year. In fact, I think we should play Texas twice every year, one in College Station, one in Austin, at bare minimum, because both schools want this game. Both schools, honestly, I think need this game because it really helps attendance. Oh, yeah. And so you see it. I mean, you want to talk about, a Tuesday night game that doesn't really have a lot of big stakes. Just, it serves as a nice little, oh, hey, this is a team we might see in a regional, which, we'll get to later. But, a team that we might see in a regional, teams that have a lot of good talent, and really just good interactions between the fan bases. So, I mean, that was probably the best Bluebell Park crowd I've seen. It was easily the best crowd I'd seen this year, especially from a 203 standpoint. The chants, the yells, everything that was going on, the heckles, everything was on point. It was a great night. Had a lot of fun. And that flowed into that next weekend when we swept Alabama. And then took care of Texas State at home, so we were on a nice little at that point it was a 7-game winning streak before we actually went on the road to Tennessee and they took 2 of 3, which was a very, very bad weekend loss for us because Tennessee was not good this year. But then we turned around and went to Mississippi State and won that series in convincing fashion. Then hosted number 1 Florida at home, lost that series, and they won convincingly, but we took a game away from that, got swept by Arkansas. And then our last series against South Carolina at home, which left us on the year 3-7 in the series.
After the regular season, I mean, before we talk about postseason, after the regular season, how are you feeling?
I had a lot of positivity because I saw a lot of good things in games. I mean, I would say probably my biggest takeaway was seeing a lot of key players that we weren't sure of how they were going to play this year step up and fill up into roles. I mean, Braden Shoemake had a pretty good year. It wasn't as good as his freshman year statistically in a lot of ways, but it was good to see him have his high points. Michael Hellman coming in looked absolutely fantastic in the second base as well as his bat. And honestly, one of my biggest ones was seeing let's see, who else did we have that really had themselves a good year? But yeah, we had a lot of young guys that ended up making a step up. A big one for me was Alante Wingate. He transferred in, and he filled us. He filled in for Yonch at third base when he was needed, and he would also fill out in the outfield. And honestly, I felt very comfortable with him out and right, as well as his bat was just absolutely fantastic to see. George Yoncha improved as the year went on. John Doxakis looked absolutely fantastic pitching. And then the biggest surprise, I think, was Nolan Hoffman on the year. He came in into a closing role as the year went on. I mean, his ERA was absolutely ridiculous. I don't have the stats up right here in front of me, but his ERA was ridiculous as the year went on. He was easily the number one lockdown closer in the SEC, if not the nation, as the year went on. And he even proved his worth as a long relief pitcher whenever he came in against Indiana in postseason. But, Nolan Hoffman, who was the last name on the roster for Childress before he kicked him because he said that he needed him to adjust his pitching, came in and did an absolutely outstanding job. So
the Aggies walked into the SEC tournament, and they did pretty well.
Yeah, no, definitely subverted some expectations, took care of a really, truly and honestly, especially now looking at what happened to Kentucky, how they got snubbed out of the tournament. Had Kentucky won and we lost, we probably would not have even had a postseason run. Mm-hmm. But, they took care of business against Vanderbilt, which more or less solidified our position in the postseason. But then we took care of business against Georgia and took care of business against Casey Mize and Auburn, who had absolutely manhandled us earlier in the season. We took it to them in the tournament, which is nice. And, unfortunately I had to bow out in the semifinal because it's single elimination at that point again. And we ended up bowing out against Ole Miss again, who was once again a very good team this year, but really a lot of positivity coming out of the SEC tournament going into regional selections.
Absolutely. And the Aggies did make a regional. They made a regional in Austin.
Yeah, we had to make the short road trip to Austin against a very good Indiana team and, subpar Texas Southern team, but, we ended up getting into that regional, and I think most people here in Aggie land probably thought that we had a good shot to do well in this regional.
I know that I did. I mean, and it's always A&M and Texas. Those games are never out of the question for me. I think both teams can always win those games because there's just so much energy. There's so much between those two schools, between the two fan bases, and the two teams feed off of that. And so I think that it's a point where, either one of those teams could have won that game, and A&M took care of Indiana game 1, and they did not do that against Texas in game 2.
Unfortunately, when you lay a nice little beefy pitch to Cody Clements, he's going to take advantage of it, and that kid had himself a very good season, especially down the road, especially down the stretch. And he looked the part. He played very well. Unfortunately, our guys just really weren't up to the task that night. We let ourselves get into a hole early and just kept digging and never really got out of it. And, made for some very interesting crowd interaction around us. I'll be perfectly honest. There was a lot of chatter, a lot of fighting, a lot of irritation. But, that's what you expect in a rivalry, especially in a regional, with a team that has been subpar over the last several seasons in Texas.
Yeah, their baseball program has suffered mightily over the last couple seasons.
Yeah, so they've been needing a season like this. And when they finally get it, I think a lot of them really just didn't know how to react to it. So they came out and they were just very irritable and very angry at anything that would come out that was anything anti-Texas, especially when it's coming from truly and honestly your bigger rival. And, if I can't sit here and say that our friends from Texas can sit back and say, oh, A&M's not a rival, because I saw it pretty firsthand. No, they absolutely give a damn. And it's, that was quite apparent over that whole weekend. So, unfortunately, I lost that game, and then a very hot day took on Indiana and got ourselves into a big hole early, but the guys didn't quit. They kept fighting. Unfortunately, it came up a couple runs short, and that was the end of the year.
And at the end of the college baseball season, Oregon State walks away as champions by the skin of their teeth.
And Carson's chatty. I feel so bad for that kid because he had that ball.
Man.
and could not make the play. And unfortunately, when that's the determining factor,
that play, I mean, it just makes me sick to watch. It makes me sick to watch. Arkansas runs over there. It's a foul ball. Just catch it. I mean, and it's over. And I mean, I can't say what's going through those guys' heads, but nerves and all sorts of stuff's going through their mind. And ball hits the ground, and game keeps going. So, it's sports. Crazy stuff like that happens all the time. Yep. And especially in baseball, and with baseball, it could happen in the first game of the season, or it can happen right there in the last game of the season, or what could have been the last game of the season for Arkansas, and what could have sealed a championship. And very, very heartbreaking stuff. Obviously, can't say one way or the other which team, quote unquote, deserved to win. Oregon State walks away with the title. Arkansas doesn't. It's just kind of the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah. And you look at Buckner against the Mets, back in the day. That ball just rolls right past him. All he had to do was make a play and, extend the game. But, that kind of stuff happens in baseball, and you just got to – and unfortunately, in a situation like that, Arkansas just couldn't recover from it, and, they got themselves shut out in the last game. Yeah. So, props to Oregon State. They had themselves a great season after what really a lot of people thought was a title-deserving season the previous year, coming out and taking advantage of their opportunities this time around. Good for them. SEC, once again, had a great showing in the tournament.
Absolutely.
Mississippi State being the obvious outstanding underdog that did do very well. And it was good seeing Jake Mangum and all those guys have that great run. Well-coached team, especially after all the crap they had to go through preseason and start of the year losing their head coach due to a scandal. Being able to turn around and have an SEC run like they did.
Absolutely.
Was very impressive and very commendable. Texas baseball, looking at them, I think they're on the right track. And looking at us, I think we have a lot of holes that we're going to need to fill. I mean, you look at Mitchell Kilkenny, who got drafted off to the Rockies. You got Nolan Hoppen, who got drafted off to the Mariners. Kason Sherrod goes to the Miami Marlins. And the big one is Michael Hellman. Ends up taking the advantage, decides to go to the league and play for the Twins. So we lose a handful of guys there. Cole Bedford is going to focus more on his academics than baseball. So, a lot of holes to be filled next season. And George Johnson took off as well. So we have a lot of space to be filled in the field, but
a lot of opportunity for young talent to come in.
Yes, absolutely. So it's going to be an interesting year next season. I think a lot of people have question marks involving Rob Childress and his ability to get us to the next level.
Certainly.
You look at him, and I look at him in the same light as I look at what R.C. Slocum was to Aggie football. Consistently good, consistently there in the postseason conversation, always has a good team. Some great teams, but a good team that just can't quite get to that next level, that can't quite get us to the championship that we need.
Right.
So, it's going to be a question to see how the fan base continues to react if he struggles again next year with the talent that he has.
Yeah. Well, after baseball season ended, I sadly had a very short playoff run with the NHL. The Penguins fell in 6 games in the Eastern Conference semifinals to the eventual Stanley Cup champions. I won't mention their name. You already know who they are.
Yeah.
It was a good season, though, and a good season for Penguins hockey. If you don't know, we talk about hockey around here, me and Rob.
A little bit.
I probably care more than Rob, but we talk about hockey around here, and the Penguins had a good season after 2 consecutive Stanley Cup championship seasons. This is about what you expected, and I can't really be all that upset about it. I had accepted back in October we weren't going to win the Stanley Cup again. And by the time March rolled around, I had convinced myself we were probably going to win the Stanley Cup again. And that's just kind of not the way it works, especially in the NHL with the amount of talent. And on an off year, the Capitals pull it off. I mean, they had a loaded roster 2 years ago, and couldn't get it done. And then this year they just had the right pieces in place, and everything kind of fell the way it was, and it worked for But the Penguins had a good year. I was definitely not disappointed by it. Their off season has been going pretty strong now, and so we'll be able to look forward to this upcoming season, and we'll preview that with more detail whenever that gets closer. But a good season all around by the Penguins, and we'll keep watching. Well, the Astros are our kind of last piece of recap. They have continued to carry that world domination into the 2018 season.
Absolutely. They have looked outstanding. I mean, their longest losing streak on the year has been 3 games. I mean, the guys have been absolutely outstanding from start to finish. Justin Verlander's been pretty dominant. I know his record won't show that, but unfortunately,
as well as Garrett Cole.
Yeah, Cole has looked very well. Just in general, it's been a lot of fun watching this Astros team again. You know, they have a lot of good pieces, a lot of guys that were maintained. And truly and honestly, I think there's a lot of stuff going forward that I think we can all be pretty excited about involving the Astros. So, at the moment, they finish currently 4.5 games behind Boston. In the over here at the All-Star break, they currently lead the West by 3 games. Actually, 5 games right now. So they're just cruising along, having a great season, taking advantage of a lot of opportunities. Already have won the series against the Rangers before the midpoint.
Absolutely. Always fun when you can win your season series before the midpoint of the season.
Yeah, so it has been a blast watching the boys play. Alex Bregman has been an absolute joy.
He has been absolutely phenomenal to watch. Every time I see him do something great, I remind myself how happy I am he's not in college anymore.
Right? Yeah, no, he's been very good. And, I mean, outstanding third baseman. Probably one of the best in the league right now.
Fantastic. I will be, really, really greatly awaiting the day where he's going to get his first Golden Glove because it's coming. And, I mean, even now, he has 20 home runs. He has been a force on the baseball diamond. Has been absolutely phenomenal. And that will continue tonight in the Home Run Derby. He is the only American League representative of the 8 players participating in the Home Run Derby, 7 from the National League.
Wow.
And Alex Bregman. So hopefully he can perform tonight. I don't know how much we all think he could actually win it, but I sure would be interested to watch. So that'll be very interesting tonight to watch the Home Run Derby, and then tomorrow night the All-Star Game, and obviously we'll have more on that next week. Well, the World Cup just ended, and France won it in one of the craziest World Cups in recent history.
Yeah, no, you want to talk about even going back to qualifying. USA misses out, Italy misses out, which is probably the biggest, honestly, one of the biggest things that's ever happened, is Italy missing the World Cup. You're talking about 4-time World Cup winner Italy not even making it to the World Cup, and that's incredible. But then you get to the group stage, and once again, madness ensues. You had Germany get knocked out.
Germany didn't even make the knockout round.
No, and they had their opportunities, and unfortunately ended up losing to 4th place in that group. They ended up losing to South Korea.
Yeah, Argentina gets booted bad by France.
Yeah, I mean France, and I will say this about France: they definitely looked to be the team of the tournament. But honestly, the biggest surprise for me was watching England make their way through, because they're not normally well known for their escapades in the World Cup, especially since '66. They had that one year where they won it at home, and since then it's just been undermining watching how poorly they participated in the World Cup up until this year. Excellent and a good young core, young coach. So England's going to have a good run. Belgium looked fantastic again. Croatia, very much a surprise, being as small of a country as they are.
And Russia looked very well as well.
Yeah, the lowest ranked team in the tournament, and they end up making it to the quarterfinal, which is very impressive.
And lose on penalties to Croatia, the team that made the final. So it was a great World Cup. I realized that there's a reason I don't watch soccer. I did not care for Mbappe's nonsense, especially in their game against Belgium. I didn't really care for any of that at the end of the game, and it frustrated me a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, I probably won't watch much soccer for 4 years, and the World Cup will come back on, and hopefully the United States will be in it, and I can watch that for a couple months and have my fill.
Maybe I can get you in, though, because we have a couple of things coming up next summer that are going to be pretty exciting. You got the Women's World Cup, which I guarantee you is infinitely less of the diving and a lot of the of the flamboyant.
The actual soccer part of
soccer.
soccer.
The actual soccer part of soccer happens a lot more than women's soccer. So you'll get to see that. The women are going to be playing in France, so they're getting ready for qualifying, and they'll get in.
France will be going insane. I mean, it'll talk about a great place to follow up with the Women's World Cup. I mean,
right.
You get to go to the defending men's champion country, and I think that'll be a pretty cool environment for that.
And I think that enough people will still have some pretty high soccer fever that there will be pretty well-attended games over there for that, even for the women. So that'll be fun to watch. And additionally for the men, we're going to have Gold Cup going on. If we find a way to qualify for Gold Cup, that's going to get us into the Confederations Cup, which is basically the B team to the World Cup. If we can do anything in Confederations, that'll automatically qualify us for World. But it's a whole lot of other crap going on. But if we can go ahead and win the Gold Cup, because we already won one, we'll be good to go. And that's going to be nothing but CONCACAF teams. So
lots of stuff coming up.
Lots of stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, football, other football. All kinds of good stuff. It'll be entertaining.
Well, speaking about football, what's the last thing we got on the docket today is SEC Media Day starts this morning. In fact, Jimbo Fisher is about to step up here in, I believe, about 15 minutes. Greg Sankey, I think, is probably just about done. Yeah. Jimbo's going to be stepping up here pretty soon, or maybe already has stepped up. My times may be mixed up a little bit. But just going into SEC Media Days, obviously we'll talk more about this next week. Just as we close, wanted to pose a couple of questions for us. Number one, what do you think the biggest question is for the Aggies going into this football season?
Well, I mean, I think my biggest thing is just going to be the expectations. What are we? I think what are our realistic expectations for this season? What are we shooting for 8-4? Are we shooting for 7-5? Do we want to see ourselves have improvement throughout the season? I mean, or are we saying, hey, we put the money where our mouth is. We want to see a championship this season. These are the type of questions that I'm going to have. Or what are the expectations from the coaching staff? Like, what are their thoughts? What do they want?
My biggest question, I think, is going to be that gel factor that we kind of talked about, that cohesiveness that we kind of thought was missing from the Kevin Sumlin era. How's that going to work? Obviously, with Elko and with Dickey is the offensive coordinator, yeah?
Yeah.
I believe so.
From Memphis, right?
Yeah. And so how those two guys handle, obviously, the offense and the defense, that's going to be my biggest question is, can they get those two units to work as units? Or in year one of Jimbo Fisher, are we going to see a couple of standouts and then some guys standing around on a football field? It'll be very interesting to me if they can get the units as a whole to mesh with each other and work really as a unit.
I agree. I'm certainly hoping that the guys can get it all done. I think there's a lot of good potential there. I really do think that this team could surprise people, but at the same time, I don't necessarily want this team to surprise people. I want us to build. I want people to recognize, this is a brand new A&M monster that's starting to be born here.
Absolutely. And then final question of the day, the SEC as a league, what's the biggest question going into the season?
I think the biggest question is, can Alabama and Georgia maintain their dominance in each league? That's going to be my question. I mean, Alabama's always good, but you never know. With contender might emerge out of the West, in particular, you look at Auburn, see if they might be able to go into Tuscaloosa and knock off the Tide this year. You got to think over in the East, to see who might be able to contend with Georgia, because everybody and their dog's saying it's going to be Georgia again. And
exactly.
But there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, you got Georgia, Florida, South Carolina all in the East, and they all look pretty okay. And then you got a slew of guys in the West. I mean, LSU has Orgeron in his technically second, but really second and a half season. You've got Alabama now having to decide whether to start Tua Tagovailoa or Jalen Harris, and you've got a great now young quarterback at Auburn in Stidham.
Yep.
He was phenomenal last year, and I expect him only to mature and get better. Ole Miss has some young talent coming up. Arkansas and A&M obviously both have new coaches, along with Mississippi State and a bunch of other teams. So it's going to be a very interesting year, and I think that my biggest question still is somebody going to do something about Alabama? I mean, You saw last year Alabama fell to Auburn, in the regular season, and
pretty convincing too.
Pretty convincing, and that had no bearing on anything. They walked into the playoffs, and they absolutely just stomped all over Clemson. And then they played a very, very close game against Georgia, which I do think that at the end, the team that deserved to win that game, based on how I watched it, I think Alabama deserved to win that game. Would have loved to see Georgia win it, but I really do think Alabama deserved to win that championship. It was theirs, and they took it. So, I mean, for me, that question is, can somebody dethrone Alabama for real? I mean, not just one loss, in the Iron Bowl, and we can, talk all day about how maybe that should have knocked him out of the playoffs or not, but that's another topic for another time.
Yeah,
it'll just be very interesting to watch and see what unfolds this year.
I agree, and I think it's going to be, with as early as our games are against top competition, poor Jimbo's getting thrown into very much a bit of a meat grinder, but we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, next week we're going to talk about the All-Star break, the All-Star game, the Home Run Derby, talk about that a little bit. We'll recap SEC Media Days, look at all the coaches and see what they had to say. And once again, we're going to get onto the Aggie football train and take a little bit of a deeper dive into the team, the schedule, and maybe some questions and predictions that way. We enjoy doing this podcast for you guys. We hope that you listen, and if you do enjoy listening, we hope that you'd share it to somebody who maybe hasn't listened to us before, and maybe talk about how great we are on Twitter, or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit.
Look and check us out.
But we thank you guys for listening. We hope you'll come back next week. Thanks. Giggle.